The alien queen mocked my silence, until she learned what I was hiding. The war ended for humanity without a final battle. There was no last heroic charge, no glorious explosion that marked the fall of Earth. Instead, it ended with silence, broken only by the slow drifting of destroyed ships and the quiet surrender of those who remained alive. The alien empire known as the Velari did not conquer through chaos. They conquered through order. Their fleets moved like a single mind, precise and unstoppable. Human defenses collapsed system by system. Communication lines failed. Colonies went dark. Within months, Earth stood alone. When the Velari arrived above Earth, they did not burn cities or shatter continents. They demanded leaders. Humanity, exhausted and outmatched, complied. That was how Elias Verne found himself standing inside the grand court of the Velari Empire. The chamber was vast beyond human scale. Curved pillars of living crystal rose into the air, glowing softly with shifting colors that reflected the thoughts of the beings within. Thousands of alien nobles filled the balconies, their forms tall and elegant, their eyes sharp with curiosity and superiority. At the center, upon a floating throne of light and metal, sat Queen Zyra of the Velari. She was ancient, powerful, and utterly confident. Elias stood alone on the polished floor below her. His hands were free, his body unrestrained. The Velari did not fear him. Why would they? He was smaller, weaker, and unarmed, just another defeated human. Queen Zyra leaned forward, her many-faceted eyes studying him. "So," she said, her voice smooth and amplified through the chamber, "this is what remains of your species' leadership." Her court murmured softly. Some laughed, others watched with academic interest. Elias said nothing. The queen tilted her head slightly. "You understand me, yes, our translators are flawless." Still silence. A ripple of amusement passed through the court. Queen Zyra smiled, a gesture that revealed sharp elegance rather than warmth. "Perhaps he is broken," she said. "The war may have damaged him." Elias kept his gaze forward. His face was calm, his breathing steady. The queen gestured, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed Earth from orbit, peaceful and blue, surrounded by Velari ships. "Your world lives because I allow it," she continued. "Speak, human. Tell me why your species fought when the outcome was so obvious." Elias did not respond. The amusement faded. Irritation took its place. Queen Zyra rose from her throne, floating slightly above it as she descended closer. "Do you believe silence is defiance?" she asked. "Among my people, silence is admission of defeat." Elias remained quiet. The queen circled him slowly, her eyes scanning his posture, his expression, his stillness. She found no fear, no anger, no despair. That unsettled her. "You are aware," she said, "that I could erase your species with a single command." Elias blinked once, that was all. Queen Zyra stopped in front of him. "Look at me when I speak to you." He raised his eyes and met her gaze, calm, focused, silent. The queen searched his mind through subtle neural scans but found nothing unusual. No hidden signals, no elevated stress, just patience. "This one mocks us," one of her generals said from the balcony. "Allow me to extract information directly." Queen Zyra lifted a hand. "No," she studied Elias again. "Tell me your name." Silence. Her smile returned, colder now. "Very well, you will remain my guest." The court erupted in murmurs as Elias was escorted away, not to a prison, but to a controlled living chamber deep within the imperial station. Days passed. Each day, Elias was brought before Queen Zyra. Each day, she asked new questions about Earth's defenses, about hidden fleets, about human technology. Each day, Elias remained silent. The queen mocked him openly now. "Humans are known for their noise," she said during one session. "Your broadcasts, your arguments, your endless chatter, and yet you say nothing." The court laughed. Elias stood still. Behind the scenes, the Velari Empire celebrated victory. Systems were reorganized. Human territories were catalogued. Resources were redistributed. And then small things began to go wrong. A supply fleet arrived 3 minutes late, not a problem at first. Then another arrived missing 2 ships, with no sign of attack. Long-range sensors began reporting empty space where stars should be, only for the readings to correct themselves moments later. Velari engineers blamed calibration errors. Queen Zyra dismissed the reports. During another session, she leaned close to Elias. "You see," she said softly, "your silence changes nothing. The universe moves on without you." Elias looked at her, his expression unchanged. Elsewhere in the Empire, a relay station stopped responding. Then another. Communication delays stretched from seconds to minutes. Still, no alarms were raised. Queen Zyra grew bored. "Why keep him?" asked one of her advisors. "He offers nothing." "On the contrary," she replied. "He offers perspective. He reminds us what failure looks like." Elias was returned to his chamber. Alone, watched. He did not pace, he did not sleep much, he simply waited. On the 10th day, a Velari Science Council convened urgently. Several automated defense networks had gone offline simultaneously. No damage, no intrusion. They simply stopped responding. Queen Zyra summoned Elias again, her mood sharpened by annoyance. "Your people left traps," she accused. "Crude, ineffective ones." Elias said nothing, her eyes narrowed. "Do not mistake my patience for mercy." Silence. She leaned back, studying him. "You believe this makes you strong." Elias finally moved, just slightly, a breath in, a breath out. The queen watched closely. Nothing else happened. She waved him away, frustrated. That night, a border system lost contact with the core. Not destroyed, just unreachable. Its stars still burned, but no signals passed through. The Veleri Empire, vast and powerful, began to experience something unfamiliar: uncertainty. And far away on Earth, humanity waited, not in fear, but in quiet preparation. Elias Verne stood silently, because silence was the last thing humanity could afford to lose. And because the most dangerous things they had ever created were never meant to be announced. The Veleri Empire had ruled for thousands of cycles, and in all that time, order had been their greatest strength. Every system answered to another. Every fleet followed clear command lines. Nothing important happened without records, confirmations, and perfect timing. That was why the delays were so unsettling. At first, they were small enough to ignore. A message that should have taken seconds arrived after a minute. A mining world reported inventory numbers that did not match central records. A navigation beacon repeated old data before correcting itself. None of it looked like an attack. Queen Zyra sat upon her throne, listening to reports with visible boredom. Around her, advisors and generals spoke carefully, choosing words that would not sound like panic. "These are minor inefficiencies," she said at last. "Every expanding empire experiences them." "Yes, your radiance," a logistics commander replied, "but the pattern is unusual." The systems affected were once human-controlled. Zyra's eyes flicked toward the human standing silently at the edge of the chamber. Elias Verne did not react. The queen allowed herself a small smile. "Then we will correct them. That is what empires do." Orders were issued. Engineers were dispatched. Diagnostic fleets jumped across controlled space, recalibrating sensors and resetting relays. For a short while, things seemed to improve. Then a patrol fleet failed to report in. It was not destroyed. No wreckage appeared. It simply did not answer calls. The fleet's last known position was inside a former human trade corridor. Queen Zyra's advisors met in private, their voices lower, their movements tighter. "This is not coincidence," one scientist said. Human systems were inefficient but adaptable. They may have left residual code, autonomous processes we have not yet identified. "They lost," a general snapped. "Defeated species do not plan galactic-scale traps." The scientist hesitated. "Humans lost battles." "That does not mean they stopped thinking." The queen summoned Elias again. He was brought into the court unchanged. Clean, calm, silent, no visible fatigue, no fear. "Look around you," Queen Zyra said, gesturing to the glowing maps now flickering with warning markers. "Your former territories are causing disturbances. Explain." Elias met her gaze, silence. Her fingers tightened on the arm of her throne. "Your refusal to speak is no longer amusing." Still nothing. She leaned forward. "If this is a human tactic, it is a poor one. Minor disruptions do not save a species." Elias did not blink. The queen dismissed him with a sharp motion, but her confidence had cracked. She felt it, and worse, she knew others could see it. Across the empire, the problems grew. Supply ships arrived at worlds that no longer acknowledged Veleri authority. Automated docks refused docking permissions without explanation. Defense platforms switched to passive mode and stayed there. Veleri commanders attempted overrides. They failed. What unsettled them most was the absence of resistance. No messages, no threats, no demands. Systems simply became unreachable. The Empire had faced rebellions before. They knew how to crush them. This was different. A junior analyst, newly promoted and still brave enough to speak honestly, presented a theory. "These systems are isolating themselves," she said. "Not shielding, not hiding, disconnecting." "From us?" a council member asked. From everything, the analyst replied. They still exist, but they are no longer part of the network. Queen Zyra listened in silence. Who is controlling this? She finally asked. No one, the analyst admitted. That is the most troubling part. The queen's gaze drifted again toward the human's empty position in the chamber. She ordered Ilias brought back immediately. This time, she dismissed the court. The chamber emptied until only the queen, the human, and two silent guards remained. You are enjoying this, Zyra said quietly. Ilias stood, hands at his sides. You think you are clever, she continued. That hiding behind silence makes you untouchable. He looked at her, expression neutral. I will ask you one final time, she said. Is humanity responsible for these failures? Ilias took a slow breath. Yes. The word echoed through the chamber, simple and unremarkable, but it landed with more force than any shout. Queen Zyra straightened. Then speak, explain. Ilias shook his head once. That was not the agreement. There was no agreement, she snapped. There was, he replied calmly. You allowed me to live, I allowed you time. Her eyes narrowed. Time for what? For you to notice. The queen's composure slipped. Notice what? That you conquered territory, Ilias said, but not understanding. She circled him, studying his face. You are saying your species planned this. We planned for losing, Ilias replied, for a very long time. Zyra laughed, sharp and cold. You expect me to believe humans outthought an empire older than your civilization? Ilias met her gaze. No, I expect you to believe we learned from being weaker. The queen turned away, pacing. You are still defeated. Yes, Ilias said. But defeat is not the same as extinction. Reports continued to arrive as they spoke. More systems offline, not destroyed, just disconnected. Queen Zyra stopped. You did not build weapons capable of this scale. No, Ilias agreed. We built something smaller. Explain. Habits, he said, fallbacks, automation that does not wait for permission. The queen looked at him sharply. You spread this across the galaxy. Wherever humans lived, Ilias replied. Wherever we were told we did not belong. You hid it well, she admitted. We had practice hiding, he said simply. For the first time, Queen Zyra felt something unfamiliar, respect. It angered her. You think this makes you powerful, she said. It does not. I can still crush Earth. You can, Ilias agreed. But you will do it alone, she frowned. Explain. You rule through connection, Ilias said. Coordination, control. We did not attack that directly. We let it overextend. The queen stared at the maps again. Her empire still looked vast, but the gaps were growing. You will stop this, she ordered. Ilias shook his head. I cannot. You started it. Yes. Then undo it. No, he said calmly. It was never designed to be undone. Her voice dropped. You are lying. I am not, Ilias replied. That is why I stayed silent. Once I spoke, it became real. The queen felt a chill. You built something without a master, she said. We built something that only activates when we are gone, Ilias said. Silence was the key. She dismissed him abruptly, sending him back to his chamber. This time her guards watched him with unease. Alone, Queen Zyra stared at the stars. For the first time in her reign, the universe felt larger than her empire. And somewhere inside the vast Veleri network, more connections quietly faded, one by one, without noise, without warning, and without mercy. The Veleri Empire did not fall apart in flames. There were no great explosions, no burning capitals, no desperate final stands. What spread instead was something far more dangerous to an empire built on perfection. Confusion. Across Veleri space, commanders argued with instruments that no longer obeyed. Navigation systems refused to confirm jump points. Defense grids stayed inactive even when manually ordered to engage. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries stopped responding, not in rebellion, but in absence. They were simply gone from the network. Queen Zyra stood before a galaxy map that no longer made sense. Entire regions were dimmed, marked as unreachable rather than hostile. Her advisors stood behind her in silence, afraid to speak without certainty. How many now? She asked. 143 systems, replied the chief analyst. All former human territories or bordering them. And expanding. Yes, your radiance, slowly but steadily. The queen's jaw tightened. Like a disease. No, the analyst said carefully. Like a quarantine. That word lingered in the air. Ilias Verne remained confined to his chamber, but the guards posted outside treated him differently now. They watched him the way soldiers watch unexploded devices, with distance, with care. He noticed, of course. Humans always notice changes in behavior. It was a survival habit. He spent his days sitting near the single transparent wall that looked out into space. He watched Veleri ships move in precise formations, still orderly, still powerful, but fewer than before. Jump lanes flickered as fleets hesitated, recalculated, rerouted. The silence around him felt heavier now, but he did not break it. Queen Zyra called an emergency council, gathering military leaders, scientists, and historians. The oldest among them had lived through dozens of expansions. None had seen this. "This is not warfare," one general insisted. "There is no enemy force to engage." "There is," a scientist replied. "We simply cannot reach it." A historian spoke next, her voice slow and thoughtful. Ancient records describe similar collapses, not caused by weapons but by loss of trust in systems. Queen Zyra turned sharply. "Trust? Empires rely on assumptions," the historian said. "That messages arrive, that orders are followed, that space behaves predictably." "And humans broke those assumptions," the Queen said bitterly. "They did not break them," the historian replied. "They removed themselves from them." The Queen dismissed the council shortly after. That night, she ordered Elias brought to her private chamber again. This time there was no court, no audience, only two beings standing across from each other, one ancient and powerful, the other quiet and patient. "You designed this to humiliate us," Queen Zyra said. "No," Elias replied. "We designed it to endure." "You are enjoying this," she accused. Elias shook his head. "No, I am relieved." She studied him. "Relieved that it worked," he said. "That humanity will not disappear quietly." "You are still conquered," she reminded him. "Yes," Elias said, "but we are not erased." The Queen turned away. "Explain the mechanism in simple terms." Elias considered for a moment. "Humans learned early that we could not control the galaxy, so we stopped trying. Instead, we built systems that could decide when to stop listening." "You taught machines to abandon you?" "We taught them to protect us," he said. "By isolation." The Queen's voice hardened. "You poisoned your own territories." "We vaccinated them," Elias replied. Across Veleri space, the effects deepened, trade slowed to a crawl. Worlds that depended on interstellar imports struggled to adjust. Veleri technology was advanced but optimized for centralized control. Local autonomy had never been necessary before. Now it was essential. Some worlds adapted, others waited for instructions that never arrived. Queen Zyra issued orders to decentralize authority. The orders took too long to reach their destinations. That delay frightened her more than any weapon could have. Elias was returned to his chamber, but his words followed her. The Veleri Empire was still massive, still dangerous, but it was no longer whole. Meanwhile, in the disconnected regions, something unexpected happened. Life continued. Human colonies that had survived the invasion found themselves alone, but free from Veleri oversight. Automated systems rerouted power. Local leaders took charge. Old protocols activated, ones designed for worst-case scenarios. Humanity had practiced living without help for generations. On Earth, communication with the stars was limited but not gone. Quiet signals passed through narrow channels, unnoticed by Veleri scanners. Humans spoke softly now, sharing data, confirming survival. They did not celebrate, they prepared. Queen Zyra received a report that shook her deeply. A Veleri world near the edge of the Empire had voluntarily shut down its long-range communications, mimicking the human pattern. "Why would they do that?" she demanded. "They believe isolation is safety," an advisor said. The Queen felt something slip through her grasp. Control. She summoned Elias one final time that cycle. "You have changed my empire," she said flatly. "Yes," he replied. "You have taught my people fear." "No," Elias said. "We taught them caution." She studied him, truly studied him now, not as a defeated enemy, but as a representative of a species that refused to vanish. "You hid this behind silence," she said. "Yes." "Why?" she asked. "Because if we spoke," Elias said, "you would have stopped listening." The Queen closed her eyes briefly. For the first time in her long reign, she understood something fundamental. Humanity did not fight to win, they fought to remain. And in a universe built on noise, speed, and dominance, their quiet persistence had done what fleets and weapons never could. It had forced an empire to slow down. As Elias was led away, Queen Zyra stood alone, staring at the dimming stars on her map. The silence she once mocked now echoed through her empire, and she feared what might come next when humanity decided it was time to speak again. The Veleri Empire still existed, but it no longer felt endless. From the outside, nothing dramatic announced the change. Star systems still burned bright, fleets still moved. The Queen still ruled from her throne of light. Yet beneath that surface, something vital had shifted. The Empire no longer trusted itself. Queen Zyra stood alone in the central observation hall, watching streams of data flow across the air. The numbers told a story she did not like. Production was slowing. Travel times were increasing. Worlds that once followed orders without question were now asking for clarification, confirmation, delay. The Velari had never needed patience before. Now patience was all they had. She remembered the human's words. We let it overextend. The thought irritated her, but she could not deny its truth. The Empire had grown by assuming connection was permanent. Humans had survived by assuming it was fragile. New reports arrived from the frontier. Several Velari governors had begun restructuring their worlds to operate independently. Local councils were formed. Backup systems were activated. Communication blackout drills were practiced. They were copying human behavior. Queen Zyra clenched her hands. They are afraid, she said to no one. Fear spread faster than rebellion ever could. She summoned her inner council again. This time she did not sit on her throne, she stood among them. We cannot continue like this, she said. Our strength is becoming our weakness. A general spoke carefully. Then we must force reconnection, reassert control. With what? Asked a scientist. We cannot reach half the affected systems, and the more pressure we apply, the more systems isolate themselves. The Queen looked toward the far wall, where the image of Elias Verne's chamber hovered among security feeds. Bring him, she said. Elias was escorted in, calm as always. But now the room felt different. The Velari no longer saw a defeated captive. They saw a variable they did not understand. You said this could not be undone, Queen Zyra said. Yes, Elias replied. But it can be influenced, she said. Nothing exists without consequence. That is true, he said. She studied him. Tell me what happens next. Elias did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. Next, he said, you decide whether your empire shrinks peacefully or tears itself apart trying to stay whole. The council murmured. You threaten us, a general said. No, Elias replied. I am explaining outcomes. Queen Zyra raised a hand for silence. Explain. Human systems were built to respond to domination, Elias said. Not negotiation. The more force you apply, the more isolation spreads. That was intentional. You plan to punish conquest, the Queen said. We plan to survive it, Elias corrected. If empires learned conquest had limits, maybe fewer species would disappear. The Queen felt the weight of centuries pressing on her. The Velari Empire had never questioned its right to rule. Now that certainty cracked. What do you suggest? She asked. Elias met her gaze. Stop expanding, stop forcing reconnection, let the disconnected systems exist. That would fracture the empire, a counselor protested. It already is, Elias said. The difference is whether it fractures with panic or adjustment. Silence filled the chamber. Queen Zyra dismissed the council and remained alone with Elias. You understand, she said slowly, that many will call this weakness. Yes, Elias replied. Humans were called weak for generations, and you accepted it. We adapted to it. The Queen turned away. You are asking me to change what my people are. I am asking you to change how you survive, Elias said. She looked at him sharply. Why help us at all? Because if your empire collapses violently, Elias said, it will take countless smaller species with it. Humans know what it means to be caught between giants. Queen Zyra searched his face and found no deception. For the first time since the war began, she issued an order that shocked her empire. Expansion halted. No new systems would be claimed. No forced reconnections would be attempted. Disconnected worlds would be left alone. The reaction was immediate. Some governors protested. Others quietly celebrated. Many were confused. The galaxy waited. Days passed, then weeks. The spread of disconnections slowed. Systems at the edge stabilized. Trade routes adapted. Smaller regional networks formed. The empire began to resemble something new, not a single perfect machine, but a collection of cooperating parts. It was inefficient. It was also resilient. Queen Zyra watched the data shift from red to amber, not solved, but manageable. Elias remained in custody, but no longer confined. He was allowed to walk guarded corridors to observe, to exist. One day, he was brought to a viewport overlooking a cluster of stars. These were human colonies, the Queen said. Yes, Elias replied. They are quiet now, she said. They are listening, he answered. For what? For signs they can speak again without being erased. The queen considered this. You built something that even you cannot control, she said. Yes, Elias agreed. That was the point. You trust it. We trust the idea behind it, he said. That survival should not depend on permission. The queen felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Understanding. She had mocked his silence because her people equated silence with weakness. Now she saw it differently. Silence could be preparation. Across the galaxy, new patterns formed. Species that had once relied entirely on Velari oversight began to develop independence. Human systems quietly assisted where possible, never openly, never loudly. The galaxy became less orderly and more alive. Queen Zyra stood once more before her throne. This time she did not sit. She ordered Elias brought before the court again. The nobles expected punishment or execution. Instead, the queen spoke clearly. The human envoy will be released, gasps echoed. He will return to his people, she continued, as proof that silence is not always surrender. She looked directly at Elias. If humanity speaks again, it will be because it chooses to. Elias bowed his head slightly. That is all we ever wanted. As he was escorted away, Queen Zyra felt no triumph, only resolve. Her empire would never be the same, but perhaps, she realized, neither would the galaxy. And far beyond Velari space, on worlds that had learned to live quietly, humans felt something they had not felt in a long time. Not victory, but hope. The human ship left Velari space without ceremony. No escort followed it. No warning signals tracked it. The empire that once announced every movement now watched in quiet restraint as a single, modest vessel slipped through open lanes and into the wide, uncertain dark. Elias Verne stood alone on the bridge, hands resting lightly on the console. The ship was small by imperial standards, built for efficiency rather than display. It hummed softly, responding to his presence like a familiar room. Behind him, the stars stretched endlessly. Ahead of him, home. The Velari Empire did not collapse after his departure. Many had expected chaos, even civil war. Instead, something slower and more difficult happened. Change. Queen Zyra remained on her throne, but she ruled differently now. Orders were shorter. Commands left room for local judgment. Where once there had been certainty, there was now consideration. Some nobles resented it, others adapted. A few left to rule their own systems independently. The empire shrank, but it did not die. For the first time in its history, the Velari learned to exist without total control. Across the galaxy, the disconnected systems stabilized. Human colonies that had lived in silence for years began to rebuild openly, though carefully. Communication returned in narrow, controlled paths. No grand declarations were made. Humanity did not announce its survival. They demonstrated it. On Earth, the sky no longer filled with alien shadows. The planet bore scars, orbital debris damaged stations, abandoned cities, but it breathed. Children were born, crops grew, factories restarted. When Elias returned, there were no crowds waiting, no speeches prepared. He was greeted by a small group of leaders who looked older than when he had left. "You did it," one of them said quietly. Elias shook his head. "We did." They walked together through the rebuilding capital. Power grids hummed under patched streets. People worked, talked, laughed softly. Humanity had learned something important during the silence. They did not need permission to continue. News traveled slowly at first, then steadily. Other species began reaching out, not to the Velari, but to humans. They asked questions. They shared fears. They wanted to know how a smaller, weaker species had forced an ancient empire to pause. Humans did not boast. They explained. They spoke about redundancy, about patience, about building systems that did not depend on constant success, about planning for failure without giving up hope. Most of all, they spoke about restraint. The galaxy listened. Queen Zyra received reports of growing human influence, not military, not territorial, cultural, philosophical. "She has turned weakness into currency," one advisor warned. The queen corrected him. "They have turned survival into an example." She requested a message channel to Earth, not a demand, an invitation. The message was simple. From Queen Zyra of the Velari. "We acknowledge humanity. We will not interfere," Earth replied after careful consideration. "We acknowledge the Velari. We choose cooperation." No treaties were signed. No borders redrawn. The agreement existed only because both sides understood the cost of breaking it. Years passed. The galaxy grew quieter but not empty. Trade adapted to smaller networks. Empires learned limits. Species once ignored found space to exist without being absorbed. Human technology spread slowly, often given freely, not weapons but frameworks. Communication tools designed to fail safely. Infrastructure that favored independence over dependence. Humanity did not rule. Humanity influenced. Elias Verne aged as humans do. He returned to a simple life, teaching younger generations what silence had once protected. He never spoke of the Queen as an enemy. She listened, he would say. That matters. When he died, there was no monument built in his name. He would not have wanted one. But across the galaxy, in countless systems, machines quietly maintained isolation protocols, not as weapons, but as reminders. Reminders that connection was a choice. Queen Zyra lived long enough to see her empire stabilize into something unrecognizable to her ancestors. Smaller, slower, more cautious, and stronger for it. One evening she stood alone, watching the stars without data overlays or command prompts, just light in darkness. She remembered the human who had stood silently before her court. She understood now. Silence had not been emptiness. It had been preparation, discipline, and trust in something beyond control. In the end, the galaxy did not remember the war for its battles. It remembered the moment an empire mocked silence and learned too late that quiet did not mean powerless. It meant waiting, and humanity, once overlooked, once conquered, had shown the universe something it would never forget. You do not need to shout to reshape the stars. Sometimes all you need is the strength to remain silent until the moment speaking truly matters.